Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on Psychedelics. If there is one thing I have noticed within the world at large, and more specifically, the realm of plant medicines, it is that we have many elders, but have lost much of the wise elders of the world. In ancient societies, and even today in small circles, these wise elders would help the rest of their tribe understand the process of life, and, in the realm of plant medicines, act as guides that would protect those that were looking to traverse these worlds and allow them to understand the ceremonial aspects that go along with them. The beauty of this is that, as the famous quote states, how you do anything is how you do everything. What these wise elders would allow the younger generations to understand and embody is that every single aspect of our lives can be ceremonial in nature, and when life is engaged in this way, life becomes a psychedelic experience in and of itself. Today's guest on the show is someone who has been doing his part as a wise elder to re-educate the countless coaches and individuals he works with in how to make every aspect of their lives a ceremony. And he has been a juggernaut in the world of making this process one which is enjoyable and joyous in nature. Not only this, but he is also an extremely skilled shaman and has been a proponent of the responsible, conscious use of plant medicines since far before the explosion of popularity in recent times regarding these medicines. In addition, he is the founder and legendary voice and soul behind the Chek Institute, which has been empowering coaches in the teachings of holistic health and how to understand how to learn, rather than the typical approach in modern-day educational establishments, which is primarily based on what to learn for the last 26 years. He is also the host of the Living 4D podcast, where he showcases in-depth, powerful conversations with leading experts in the realms of health, fitness, spirituality, plant medicines, and more, with the intention of bringing the uncensored truth of the world at large to the people, and is someone that I, as well as countless others, have looked up to as a massive inspiration in our never-ending quest of curiosity, childlike wonder of the world around us, and how to remember our divine nature as God embodied in the human form. So, without further ado, get your finest herbs loaded up and ready to help me in welcoming the man, the myth, the one and only Paul Chek to the show.
Geez, that was such a good introduction. I think I'm going to die any day now.
Guilty as charged, man. I had to come correct for an interview with Paul Chek, you know?
What do you do after that? You just have to die to fulfill the legend.
Well, you know, we talked a lot yesterday about premature ejaculation, right? So in a way...
Well, that's a mini death.
Yes.
It's more death for your woman than it is for you.
Yes. A slower death for you, but definitely a death for your woman as well.
Yeah, unless you have friends that you can call to come tag team wrestle.
Yes. And you know, man, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you.
We got to do an amazing episode on your show yesterday, Living 4D, that will be coming out in the near future. And, you know, to get you on this show and to have you here, you know, one of the things that I love starting with is people's intro into plant medicines. And considering the lifestyle you've led, right, with being in the military, with being a very get-shit-done type person, I'm very curious how someone with that type of mindset became interested in the idea of plant medicines.
Well, I was aware of them from a young age. I think the first time I did mushrooms when I was about 18. I don't know what the strain was, though, but it was very buzzy. I felt like I was on speed. There were mushrooms that one of my friends picked out of the fields. I don't even know if they were meant to be consumed, you know. But I remember we were doing this thing called a rod run, and I was, you know, big into hot rod building, and I had a really trick car. I had a Triumph TR6, you know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Me and a buddy took the drivetrain, the engine and the transmission out of a 69 Corvette that was crashed. So we put it into this Triumph TR6 and built the frame up and the suspension, and this thing would pull the front wheels off the ground. And we were driving from Courtenay, British Columbia to Victoria, the capital of British Columbia, on Vancouver Island. And it was, you know, like probably 60 or 80 or 100 of us with our hot rods or show off cars, And so not knowing what I was getting into, I was driving down the road, like really buzzed up. I didn't feel like I was leaving my body or anything. I just felt like I drank 20 cups of coffee or something. I was sweating a lot. You know how you go through waves of hot and cold with mushrooms?
Yes.
And then we ended up at some big dance, and I just remember being jacked up. And back then I was hardcore into martial arts, so I was all pumped up waiting for someone to pick a fight with us or something. But I never did mushrooms again till I started doing training with a doctor that I did a year of training with in 2006. And I used to smoke pot because I didn't like alcohol. I had a very bad experience with alcohol as a kid and almost got alcohol poisoning. I ended up waking up in the drunk tank and didn't even know how I got there. And
wow.
And it just, I was literally drunk for like 3 days. Every time I ate food or drank water, I felt sickly drunk.
Yeah.
And just the thought of alcohol after that just was blah. But I was working with Danny Way when he was 19, and he really badly damaged his neck and spinal cord. And first he was a quadriplegic, then he became a paraplegic, but he was, 6 months after the injury, every doctor told him he would never be able to ride a skateboard again. And I had rehabbed a surfer buddy of his from another neck injury. And so long and short of it is he sent Danny to me. I rehabbed Danny in 4 months, and then he went and won his first contest back. But I also rehabbed his brother who had a brain injury. And these two guys found this doctor. Well, they actually were working with this doctor. They were both seeing him while they were seeing me. And so my first introduction to this doctor was that whatever the hell the guy's doing, it works.
Yeah.
Because I know enough about the body and how it's responding that I could tell every time they would go see this guy and come back to me, things were actually improving, but I knew it was something other than what I was doing. Well, they both went and had a DMT ceremony with him. And so Danny came back and said, Paul, you've got to try this. You're like, I know you're Mr. Pure and everything, but you probably aren't going to want to do this, but you really should. It's an amazing experience. Yeah. He says, it's like you get to see God kind of thing. And, he didn't really realize that I had a background in using pot, and I'm open to exploring anything. My only rule is I won't do it if it's addictive.
Oh, 100%.
So I went in 2006 and did my first DMT ceremony. And this is before vaporizers. So it was out of a glass pipe, and it was full on.
Yeah.
And so it was 1, 2, 3, God. And so I had a complete and utter union. But to preface that, my mother became a yogi when I was 12 and joined the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings. I learned to meditate very early and had a lot of experiences, and I had a long string of out-of-body experiences, and realized that I actually had skills that they called remote viewing, which I later exercised and studied and realized what I thought was just an out-of-body experience. I was actually remote viewing. I was out of body too, and also in meditation and Tai Chi, I started working with Master Fong Ha, I think in 2003, and I'd had complete non-union experiences in Tai Chi, and I'd had multiple samadhis just with no drugs at all. So when I did the DMT experience, it was powerful, of course. You can never get used to that. But I wasn't afraid because I had the sense that I'd already been there. But it was such a profound, moving, healing experience that my first thought as the drug wore off is, wow, so many people would be so much healthier and happier if they could have this experience of losing their ego and realizing that we are in an infinite field of love.
Yes.
And that nothing is separate, and that the identity of the ego is really an illusion that has its function, but if you get too trapped in it, then you get lost in it. And so the first thing I did after the ceremony was over is I went to this doctor and said, I'd be happy to pay you to train me for however long it takes for you to agree that I have the skill to manage the ceremonies on my own and run my own healing ceremonies for people that need help from me. And so he knew who I was because I was sharing these patients with him. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I've got some problems in my body. How about if we meet every Saturday and you work on me for a couple of hours, and then I will take you into a different type of ceremony and we'll work together for a while. So I did that for 1 year.
Wow.
And after 1 year, we did about 40 something ceremonies together. And we did many different derivations of the DMT molecule. We did LSD, we did mescaline, mushrooms. I can't remember if I did ayahuasca with him, but I studied ayahuasca and made my own for many years and still can and do. But I reached the point with ayahuasca where after about probably 60 ceremonies, I just didn't feel called to it anymore. I just felt like ayahuasca saturated. And so then I just continued to study all sorts of different plant medicines and test them. And I spent years basically researching them. Once I did that year of training with him, I was working, a lot of my students were getting themselves in trouble all over the world. And so without going into a long segue into that, because I'll let you ask me whatever you want, but what happened was I realized, because this guy, the doctor that trained me, he's a high doser. He doesn't believe in low dose therapies. He believes in extinguishing the ego, and there was a lot of things he did that I do not agree with. I saw a lot of people get hurt.
I can imagine.
He did not have any preparation or anything like that. It was more of a, whatever your karma is, that's what you get.
Yeah.
If you have a great journey, then you're supposed to. If it's the shits, that's what was supposed to happen.
Yes.
And so I watched a lot of people get damaged because I would assist him with ceremonies. And as I was doing that, I was studying all the great pioneers, Stanislav Grof, Houston Smith, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass. I mean, I've got a whole library full of these books and the history of it, the biochemistry of it. And I also joined the Native American Council and became licensed as a medicine man and spirit guide so that I was protected to do it legally as part of a healing ceremony. But what my soul guided me to do was to take each of the different medicines that I was directed to and do a ceremony with a standard shamanic dose, so maybe 5 grams of mushrooms. And then each week, basically for many years, I would do one ceremony a week if I could. I was traveling all over the world, so sometimes I would be in other countries doing them on days off or whatever, and depends who I could get access to the medicines from and where I was at. But for probably 10 years, my consistent practice was to explore each medicine, and I would go up one notch. So 1 hit of LSD, 2 hit of LSD. And I would map out the experience. I would draw pictures. And I'm very stable on a journey. Many people have been kind of shocked at the fact that I could take a full hit of DMT and then start writing notes in a notebook and draw pictures. And they're like, how in the world are you doing that?
Experience.
Well, it's not just experience. I grew up in a very, very stressful environment with a father that was very, very dangerous. And I was a motocross racer and a kickboxer and a boxer and a stock car racer and a drag racer. So those are all environments. And I was a paratrooper. So I came from environments where you had to learn to deal with pain and still keep your head on. And you had to learn to stay focused under extreme intensity. I've had motocross races where I wiped out and was knocked out cold, and people threw water on me, got me back on my bike, and I just jumped back into the race and even won sometimes. So I learned how to really laser focus.
Yeah, go business.
Yeah. So I had this natural ability. Plus I rode in the rodeo, and you have to really have your shit together or that bull will do some work on you.
Yeah. And
so, when you get in these high adrenaline environments and you're used to that, the transition is easier to make. I say to people, and a lot of people get confused. I remember I said this to Kyle Kingsbury, and he didn't tell me this till about a year later. He said, when you first said that, I thought you were being an asshole, but now I realize what you were saying. And what I say is to really be a pioneer on the medicines, you have to have a very strong ego.
Yes.
Otherwise, you just get dissolved and turn into a puddle of mush. And if I'm leading a ceremony, I always take the medicine that they're taking at the dose that they're taking, so I'm on the same channel, having a similar experience. But if you don't have a strong enough ego, then you're no use to them as a guide.
100%.
And if you don't have a strong enough ego to differentiate, what's coming up in you, like, you might think you're seeing the devil, but not realize it's you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't maintain conscious awareness and witness the show inside of yourself without getting swept away, then you become somebody that's particularly a dangerous person in a ceremony, because I've seen people screaming, yelling, kicking, running, banging off walls, knocking furniture over, biting, scratching, kicking, being dangerous, but they're totally unconscious that they're even doing it. When the medicine wears off, they're like, what happened? And they don't even know. So to lead a ceremony, especially when you're taking people into the deeper realms, if you don't have a strong ego, you will not be an effective guide, So it was funny because I said that to Kyle and Aubrey. I was doing some work with both of them, and Kyle admitted to me a year later, he goes, when you said that, I thought you were just being an asshole. But he goes, now, and Kyle's done like 30 grams of mushrooms twice. I was going to say, after
that, he had to have understood.
So he said, I really do understand what you mean now. But originally I didn't. It seemed contradictory to everything, because we're supposed to be taking these things to get rid of our ego. I said, well, look, if you heal, what you end up with is a healthy ego. But if you have no sense of self, then you're really not of any use in the world, because you have no agency. You might as well just be a rock or a flower. Nothing against rocks and flowers. I love them. But, that's not who you want parenting your kids, kind of thing. Or
exactly.
Watching over the newbies that are coming here to heal all their traumas and things like that. I would go till I hit psychosis, and I would always hire a sitter, someone I could trust to watch over me, and their instructions were, don't get involved and don't be shocked, because I could be going into all sorts of wild things. And, when you're that deep, all sorts of stuff comes out, even past life stuff. And, sometimes I'd be doing wild dancing and chanting and
stripping off all your clothes.
Yeah, I strip my clothes off all the time. When you get in deep on the medicines,
it's so liberating.
Something that your just body does not want. And I learned right away, any kind of synthetic clothing is a very bad idea in a shamanic ceremony, as it is in Tai Chi or Qigong. But there was a couple of times I had clothes that might have been 10% lycra, and it just felt like it was choking me.
Oh, yeah.
Over here behind you and all through this place, I've probably got 100 journals, and I would do a specific process that I developed to keep it very sacramental. I would use art and have my soul guide me into painting or drawing with color pens or whatever I was using at the time, set my intention, and then I would take notes of the experience. So like at 45 minutes in, this is what's happening. Half an hour in, this is something you need to be aware of at this dose with somebody. You can really get into some heavy stuff. And so I went up to 9 hits of liquid clinical grade LSD. And that's when the wheels pretty much started to fly off. And so, I probably could have done 10, but I just felt like I wouldn't be able to regulate myself at that point.
Yeah, you're checked out after about 8 for me. It becomes very challenging to be in a typical life, right? That's when you have to have the sitter, and you have to make sure you have the exact perfect set and setting. What I found is the dose goes up, the more important it is to have the set and setting and all of those things perfected. Yes.
The thing for me is that, it's a bit complex, but when you run an institute and you're pretty known worldwide, what comes out of you when you cross the threshold of, a psychological breakdown, you go into so deep into the unconscious, you don't even know you're alive. You're just acting out the experience. And that brings you into your primal urges. So, you can find yourself masturbating or, any number of things that would scare the shit out of neighbors, and
going to the bathroom in public,
whatever. Squatting on your patio and having a shit or something. And you have no reservations, because you're really knocking out all your programming at that point.
Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. What's up, ladies and gents? I wanted to take a second while I had your ear to share with all of you a very important announcement. Now, anyone who's been listening to the show for some time now knows that I am passionate about coaching and helping other coaches up-level their coaching practice. What I have noticed in working with hundreds of coaches is that coaches of all different types are facing challenges with being able to get their clients strong and consistent results, understand where to put their energy to allow their practices to thrive, stand out in the vast sea of coaches, move from imposter syndrome into trusting themselves, and ultimately make the money necessary to be financially independent in their coaching practice. The root of these issues comes down to a lack of connection with your creative force as a coach and entrepreneur. Now, this is why we at Highly Optimized have created the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. The reason that cannabis is the focus of our program is because cannabis acts as an imagination medicine. And in order to break free of these challenges, you must first be able to imagine yourself as the coach that is successful and has been able to break free of these challenges. When you are able to truly imagine and connect with the most powerful version of yourself, you can find the clarity to build your business, your authentic voice to speak directly to your clients, and the faith that you can overcome everything standing in your way. Once you have experienced and learned how to achieve these results for yourself, you will be able to offer this same unique skill set in your coaching practice to support your clients in overcoming their limiting beliefs and allow them to experience the breakthrough results that will make you stand out as a world-class coach. In this program, you will learn the science behind cannabis, how to experience the healing powers of cannabis, and how to facilitate these healing powers with your clients. With personalized one-on-one support on how to apply these frameworks into your business and weekly group calls within a community of coaches just like you, you will be equipped with a unique skill set that will allow you to get consistent, powerful results with your clients, feel confident in your coaching abilities, and allow you to gain financial independence while having the opportunity to wake up each day excited to share your important work with the world. For anyone listening who is hearing the call to set yourself apart and develop a unique set of coaching skills not found anywhere else in the world, jump over to the link on our Instagram bio and book a complimentary call with me today. Together, we will go over your current challenges in your business, your goals for your business, and decide together whether you qualify for a seat in the program. The next class begins February 9th, and spots are filling up quickly to be a part of the budding movement that is cannabis coaching. So book your call today and position yourself as a leading voice of how to work with this sacred plant medicine in your practice. Thank you all for your continued support, and as always, enjoy the show.
So I would go to the point at which I could feel that if I went one dose further, I would probably scare the hell out of my sitter, and they might call the cops or or the hospital or think that I was really in trouble. And Penny doesn't like to see me in that state, so she kind of just doesn't want to be around.
Yeah, don't ask, don't tell.
It scares her, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, because of having a responsibility to the public, I didn't want to push the research to the point where it might trigger off alarm bells that could lead to, you know, people having perceptions that actually did not support my mission or were misinterpreted. But believe me, I've been extremely deep, and there's plenty of people that I've done ceremonies with that are deep psychonauts like Kyle, who can tell you that I can go as deep as you can imagine and still walk, talk, and rescue people. But in my research, of course, I was just pushing the threshold. So I did that for a number of years. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to map out these dimensions. Without going into a long thing, I could tell you all sorts of things I've run into. I mean, I've run into aliens many times, had long conversations with them, sometimes had the shit scared out of me because some of them did not like it when I showed up there, you know.
They weren't like the praying mantises in the sun.
The praying mantises were beautiful, but some of the aliens felt invaded on, almost like if somebody just walked into your house while you were having dinner. You're like, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
And they would act like that, like, you don't belong here. You know? And I have had encounters with dark entities that were quite scary. And when I got into the highest doses of LSD, I had a really intense, probably 4-hour encounter with gargoyles. You know, because I have a lot of background and study and how to use my energy field. I've worked with shamans, studied shamanism, and practiced a lot of it. I know how to protect myself, but it's very hard to really keep yourself that focused, because when you get into these dimensions where you have some of these negative entities, they're full on. You know, they're not on any medicines. They know exactly what they want.
And they can attach onto you too, right?
Oh, they were trying to get into me, and there was, you know, they were all around the room, and it was intense. I mean, I had to really focus on my breathing and keep my psychic energy in my body and work against the medicine, because, you know, the medicine's opening you up. That's why so many people get entity possessions. Absolutely.
You have no protection.
Most people don't realize this. There's studies. The guy that built the BioWell technology, the Russian Krakow, I think his last name is. I've got a couple of books by him. But he did studies on people after mushrooms and ayahuasca and showed that it took 2 weeks for their energy field to return to normal.
Wow.
So after you're on a ceremony like that, your field is just wide open for about 2 weeks, and it slowly closes. So you imagine an onion. You know how when you look at a book for building an engine, it'll show like a carburetor expanded so you can see all the parts?
Yes.
Your layers of your field, like an onion, just open. And so any entity can just walk right into you, right?
I mean, that's one of the most challenging things I found. And, you know, when I took HLC1, you shared a story in class about, I think you were going to Toronto or somewhere in Canada, and you had an entity attached to you, right? And one of the women at the restaurant mentioned it. I'd love to hear that story.
Oh, yeah, I can tell you that one. I was doing some research because LSD really enhances clairvoyance. So for a couple of years, I experimented with microdoses on mushrooms and LSD, and I would use it for painting and doing my own ceremonies and just downloading poems and chants, and sometimes to prepare for a patient that's coming to see me, I'll use the medicines to go talk to their soul and see what's really going on and what's in their history, things that I need to know about to really help them. And I happened to be in Toronto, and one of my students' mothers was very sick. She was dying of liver cancer, and she had cancer all through her body, but she was really in a very dark place and was carrying a lot of dark energy. But I did one hit of LSD that day, and as I said, you can't close your field very well, and I have to work against the medicine to close my field. And I didn't realize at the time that I had picked up an entity from her. And I'd worked on her, and then for a couple of hours, and I was walking to lunch, and I was just feeling terribly depressed and like I was very scattered inside. And I'm like, what in the hell is wrong with me? I've never felt this way. Usually after I do healing work with people, I feel more invigorated and more integrated because I'm channeling love and life force energy through my body into theirs. So usually the more love I put into them, the more harmonious I feel. So I always kind of get a giggle because people pay me to be blissed out. And because when I pass that energy through me, it affects me, right? So this was very unusual in that I did a healing on somebody, but I felt really bad and off, and I knew something was wrong. I wasn't aware that I was carrying an entity in me at that moment. and the medicine was still working, and it's, I'm using like clinical grade stuff. So even one hit of 75 micrograms is, it's enough to open you up pretty good.
Yes.
And so I walked into this little tiny hole in the wall spot that I found in downtown Toronto. Penny did some research to look for places with organic food, because we won't eat things that are not organic unless we absolutely have zero choice. And then I choose the best of the worst. But this lady that owned this little restaurant she had the restaurant up for sale, and she'd been studying for several years to be a healer. And she was one of these kind of hole in the wall mystics, who you'd never expect. But I just happened to walk in there at about 2 p.m. when the lunch crowd was gone. There was nobody in the restaurant. And as soon as I walked in and started talking to her, she looked at me and she goes, "How are you feeling right now?" I said, "To be honest with you, I'm feeling really lousy." I said, "I just did some healing work on somebody." And I said, "I don't normally feel this way after I do healing work, but I feel very depressed and like scattered inside." She goes, "You're carrying an entity." I said, "Oh, you can see that?" She goes, "Yes, I can see it. You've got an entity in you." She goes, "Would you like me to show you how to get rid of those?" And I said, "Absolutely." So she taught me an amazing, simple technique for clearing. And she just came out from behind the counter and took me over to the corner of her little tiny restaurant and she showed me how to blow the thing right out of me. And right after that, it was like someone just turned the lights on. And so that was quite a gift. And that's when I decided to stop using medicines and healing ceremonies, because a lot of the people that come are sick because they are carrying entities. And I have had a lot of experience with entities, but I also maybe fell victim to my own sense of impermeability, meaning I kind of like to think I'm not ever going to get one.
Yeah.
That's stuff that happens to other people.
Yes.
But that day, Great Spirit delivered me a warning sign. And the warning sign was, be very careful about using plant medicines, particularly when you're around people that aren't healthy psychologically. And she was not healthy psychologically. And so after that, I stopped using medicines during healing ceremonies. Not during healing ceremonies. Well, yes, a healing ceremony, but I don't use medicines to heal people when I'm doing one-on-one work if I don't know who they are and I haven't already done a lot of investigation. This was just a one-off thing where the guy called me. I was on the road, said, "My mom's dying. Do you think you can help her? I'd be happy to pay you." So I did it more as a favor to him and his family, which wasn't my normal procedure. But it was a gift in that it made me very conscious of the fact that even somebody with my skills and abilities can become permeable under the influence of the medicines. So I was quite grateful for it, because it made me much, much more aware of why I have the procedures I do to evaluate people and to do the work that I do with them to get ready to use any kind of plant medicines, so that I know exactly what I'm dealing with, who I'm dealing with, why I'm doing it. I have lots of history. And then I can decide to use the medicines if I want to. But if I'm doing entity extractions, I don't want medicines in me, because it's just too dangerous.
Yeah, you don't want to leave yourself open.
No. See, I don't want to have to split my attention between protecting myself and working with them, because then I'm not fully there for them.
Exactly.
I'm having to take half of myself to protect me and half of myself to work on them. And it's actually quite mentally draining, and it's really not an effective way to channel unconditional love through you, because you're too busy creating conditions in yourself, right? So you have to be something other than what you're trying to give the person.
100%, and I see this a lot in the popularity of psychedelics today, right? Especially having gone to plenty of music festivals and things like this. I often joke that something I fell into in my younger years, and also something I see people falling into, is they'll take a psychedelic and then they'll pretty much put themselves in a situation where they have to seem as normal as possible, right? Like they're at a music festival, they take, say, LSD, and then they're trying to do all the things they would do in their sober state of reality. And it's like, what a personal hell to be in, right? Like, why are you taking a medicine and then forcing yourself to do normal things, right? Like, it's a lack of understanding of the application and use of psychedelics, but also the application of ceremony. And it's so important to recognize that because like what we talked about, right, with all these potentialities of entities to attach to. I mean, you think about a music festival, you're on 50,000 people. It's terrible, right? I mean, it's the exact opposite of set and setting, right?
Yeah, that's using a drug as a drug versus a medicine medicinally.
Yes.
Or a spiritual sacrament sacramentally. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that end up coming to me with really serious mental, emotional problems after going to shamanic ceremonies all over the world, from the Amazon to Peru, you name it. I've had lots of these people come to me over the years. They're going there to what's supposed to be a ceremony, a shamanic ceremony with plant medicines run by shaman or whatever. But the way those things are often run and the way they're using their own internal mindset is that they're going there, I'm trying to think of the right words. They often are going there to have an experience to keep up with the Joneses because it's vogue.
Yes.
It's kind of like...
It's trendy.
How big of a wave did you ride last week? Now I got to go find a bigger one.
It's a dick measuring contest. We were talking about it yesterday, right?
Yeah, and it's not just guys doing it; it's women doing it too. Although I must say, it's probably 9 guys for every 1 woman I've had to help. Women are inherently more savvy about protecting themselves. Women aren't dick measuring like guys are.
Yes.
You know, they're more conscious of the risks involved. Men are more like, if he can do it, I can do it.
Testosterone.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of younger men too, unfortunately, because they don't have enough smarts in them yet.
Young, dumb, and full of cum.
Young,
right?
dumb, and full of cum every time. Yeah. So if you go even to a well-run ceremony, but you're not ceremonial within yourself, well, you always attract to you what you are. That's how you meet what I call the divine mirror.
Yes.
If you're acting in ways that are disrespectful to the medicines or to the intention of the group, like the shaman could be running a really good ceremony, but you may not be interested. You're just there to get your mind blown out. So you're essentially moving in the opposite direction of the group, which it would be like being a soldier who's marching out of step. Everybody in the platoon knows who you are because we're all moving as one unit. And all of a sudden there's this footstep hitting the ground half off every time. And it's irritating as hell. Like, what's wrong with this guy? Can't walk. So when a person's not psychologically mature enough and ready to be in a real ceremony, then they're just they're getting stoned.
100%.
And they're inevitably going to meet their unconscious and then blame it on the drug. And then those are the people that come out of ceremony usually with problems that can take years to resolve, and entities, because they're opening. You see, if you're in a properly run ceremony with a skilled shaman, the shaman creates sacred space and the shaman creates harmony in the group. And when you have harmony in the group, because it's been harmonized properly, the stronger people in the group actually give their energy to the weaker person in the group. Because everybody's in circuit together. We all become one organism, so to speak. But if somebody's not participating, then what happens is they create like a short circuit. So if they're in the group for the right reasons and they are participating, then the stronger people's energy will flow into them and fill them up to protect them, because they're actually in a sacred space and they're in a sacred mindset. But if somebody's thinking like, I don't know why I'm doing this, I came because my buddy wanted me here, that kind of thoughts, then what happens is they short circuit the group. And that makes them very attractive for the entities that are in the other people that they came to heal.
Yes.
Or it makes them attractive from the perspective that the way they're acting is going to be mirrored in their own inner experience. And so then they become a royal pain in the ass to the group because they have to confront that broken part of themselves with the group. And it usually ends up being like a shit show, which is why I don't like group ceremonies, because inevitably they turn into catharsis and, kind of like kids kicking and crying because they're mad at mommy and daddy because they want the bedroom cleaned or something, instead of proper healing. Now, there's obviously going to be catharsis in a real healing ceremony, but there's a big difference between somebody who's having to meet the shadow of themselves because they're being stupid, and somebody who's, or immature, and someone who's confronting their shadow of an honest interest to heal. Yeah,
and an honest intention, right? Like an honest awareness that could happen, right? Like, it's important. What I found, in having many journeys myself, some with facilitation, some just on my own, is that for me, it's so important to set the intention of, first, anything that's going to happen is happening for me. Yeah. And I trust and have faith in the process of these medicines, of life, et cetera, because when I go into an experience with that sort of intention, what ends up happening is that no matter what happens, I'm more quickly able to pattern interrupt myself and go, oh, that must be exactly what I need to move through this, right?
Yeah.
And, you were talking about the group ceremonies, and what it reminded me of was the mycorrhizae fungal networks in soil, right? Like, if one tree is deficient in nutrients, the other trees will provide nutrients to that, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if one of those plants gets doused with chemical salt nutrients, it's going to create a big challenge for the other plants around that area because it's going to kill off some of that mycorrhizae. Yeah. And it sounds exactly like that short circuit you were talking about.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot like that. Because then everybody has to protect themselves. The other trees have to protect themselves. So they have to let that tree die in order to protect all the other trees in the network, which is what's going on in the world right now.
Yes.
We have to let some trees die because they're making choices that only they can take ownership of, and ignorance is not bliss.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it brings me to my next point, which is a perfect segue, which is I really enjoy talking, especially with people like yourself, about what we think is going on here, right? Not just with the world today, of course, we can get into that, but just with like Earth School in general, Soul School, the nature of reality. What do you think's really going on here? What's your best theory on it?
Well, it's not a theory for me.
It's a knowing.
I've spent my whole life investigating this. The best way to describe it is to quote Plotinus, the Greek philosopher, who's very deep. I've studied him a lot. Plotinus says that the soul's greatest addiction is to matter because the soul itself is really pure consciousness. In Hinduism, they say Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman, which means Atman, soul, Brahman, God. Atman is Brahman means soul is God, and Brahman is Atman means God is soul. Only God or source, and I'm not talking about a Christian God or a Muslim God, I'm talking about source, pure intelligence, pure awareness, pure consciousness.
And soft.
If you want to think of it that way, yes. But that which cannot be named, that for which there is no other, that which creates and is one with all. So when you realize that a soul is actually an expression of divine intelligence wanting to experience any number of its own potentials, right? That's why we're all different.
Of course.
We're all tuned to different frequencies, and we all have different past life histories. But the point I'm driving at is the soul gets easily addicted to matter because if you're pure consciousness, you can't see yourself. It would be like space. If you took two chunks of space and faced them at each other, they wouldn't know the difference between each other. Analogy I give my students is if you take two perfectly polished mirrors and face them at each other, can they distinguish themselves from the other? No, they can't, because they're looking at a reflection of themselves, and so is the other. But paradoxically, that reflection that is coming back to them is a gift from the other, and vice versa. But because they're both pure mirrors, there's no way to distinguish. But if I took a piece of maybe some lipstick and put an X on one, well, then now they could distinguish themselves, right?
Absolutely.
So the analogy I'm giving you is as soon as you put matter on one of those mirrors, the soul says, this is me.
Yes.
I'm not, you don't have this.
Yes.
Look at me. And we'll call that a body.
Yes.
I have a body. And so if you think of the soul as an artist and you think of matter as the color palette, an artist with no colors has a hard time painting or creating. So the soul loves matter because it gives you earth, water, fire, air, plasma, and ether as octaves of vibration within which there's many derivations. Water can be frozen, it can be mist, it can be hot, it can be cold, it can be a geyser, it can be the stuff going down the toilet taking waste away. Air can be in many forms. So the soul comes into the created realm and it engages matter because it says, you see, most people when they stand in the mirror and they see themselves, they say, there I am. I mean, they don't say that, but they look at and say, you know it's you you're looking at.
100%.
Right? But how do you stand in front of a mirror without your body and say, there I am? Now, the only way you can do that is through the evolution of spiritual development. So the earth, in my observation, is largely populated by what I call immature souls. The more unevolved the soul is, the more material form it needs to embody itself, because the power of God to create and destroy is invested in each soul. Matter slows energy down. Remember, matter is spirit moving slowly enough that you can interact with it. So when you're encased in dense matter in a three-dimensional reality, if you want to destroy things, it's hard to destroy too much without other souls being alerted to it. For Hitler to try to take the world over, he had to amass about 1 million people and spend a lot of time and energy building armament and doing things that it's not likely you're going to keep secret from the intelligences of other militaries who are constantly surveying for these kind of activities because they're threats. But in the astral plane, you create as quickly as you think. So someone like Hitler living on the astral plane could destroy many other souls very quickly. So when you're in the earth plane, you're largely dealing with souls that are still in kindergarten to realize the power of the mind and the power of their creative and destructive abilities. And so the material form is sort of like a gift, but it's also a form of bondage because it moves very slowly and it takes a lot of energy. I mean, you only have to break one atom to have an atomic bomb, right? So the bondage of an atom is extremely strong. So we clothe ourselves in this atomic form that's very, very concentrated. It's like a suit of armor, so to speak. It's flexible and dynamic and it's magical, but it encases us in this form so that we can begin to have an experience of ourselves. Like we learn that if we think negative thoughts, it affects the matter and the systems of our biology. It makes your stomach sick, gives you ulcers, causes constipation, headaches, anxiousness, nervousness, skin problems, what a million things, right? So there's always this feedback loop between the biological material self and the psychological self or the psyche or the soul. So it's kind of got a living mirror in the body, and the world becomes a living mirror, right?
Yes.
So the earth as a being, Gaia, devotes herself to providing the resources to clothe souls, whether they be microorganisms or fish or reptiles or mammals or anything that lives here, because that's what her gift is as a deity. She is a very evolved deity herself. She's evolved enough to give herself in the kind of sacrifice that you see going on around the world, which is extreme.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine if you were Gaia. You'd be like, I think it was Prometheus who, if I remember the story right, one of the gods got pissed off at him for stealing the fire, and his punishment was that a raven or something was going to eat his liver every day. And he said, I don't give a shit, I want to free the humans kind of thing. And I may be mixing the myths up. It's a long time. But she's kind of like that. She's letting us eat her liver every day because it's her level of evolution to sacrifice herself. But you have to think what kind of an intelligence could make the kind of beauty that we see as the world and participate with the consciousness of the sun in particular and the other planetary bodies, all of which are higher levels of consciousness. And for a lot of people, that's just woo-woo shit. But, that's because your life and your beliefs always reflect your level of development.
Absolutely. And they probably haven't had the direct experience.
Yeah.
Like you haven't, like I have.
Yeah. I mean, I think as Monica Gagliano recently said on my podcast, I said, don't you think it would be great for us to get a bunch of these scientists together that are so materialistic and take them on a real good DMT ceremony so they could really realize the limitations of their belief system? And she said, actually, no, I don't think they would change. She said, if you really want to do something, go to the politicians because they're the ones that are actually funding the scientists.
Yeah, they're pulling the strings.
And they're going to be more open. She said scientists are notoriously closed-minded because that's the system they've been conditioned into. Mm-hmm. But her point is just that even the right medicines won't work for people that are against it already,
100%.
It's like, if you don't believe in a homeopathic, you're working against the therapy. You're working against the medicine. If you don't believe that a doctor is going to help you, then there's no sense even going.
Yeah, well, the power of belief is so important. I mean, Bruce Lipton's work has showed the biology behind belief.
Yeah.
I mean, it's extremely powerful.
So the point I'm driving at with this explanation of what are we doing here, we're here experiencing ourselves in material form so that we have a sense of self that the soul can recognize as a tangible I am. But if I waved a magic wand and got rid of all the matter in your body and you merged with space or merged with consciousness, you would not know who you are until you had developed yourself enough to realize that you are not your material body, that you are a spiritual being having a physical earthly experience. And that's what spirituality really is. That's what true spirituality is. And that's what alchemy is all about.
Absolutely.
It's the progressive release of the physical form through the raising of one's consciousness to higher states of awareness. And as you go up in your awareness, you begin to have a functional dissolution or breaking down of the ego's barrier system. So even though I've got a very healthy, strong ego, and I know who I am, but I also know that I'm those flowers and I'm those trees and I am the same stuff that this building's made out of, and that the illusion of separation is what allows love to exist, because if there was no perceptible Ryan over there, in other words, if two mirrors couldn't distinguish each other, how would they know who and what to love?
Absolutely. It would just be one thing. It would be them.
It would just be one thing. And love has to have a duality to flow, because even if you love yourself, you say the words, I love myself. So I is the divine, the soul, the witness, loving what it thinks of itself as its body. So there's a duality there. Once you go beyond duality, you can't even talk, because to talk induces duality. That's why you can't use words to describe God. You can only use words to describe what God's created, right? I can say, your name is Ryan, I'm in a house. Those are expressions of the divine. But to say the house is God would be a very big misunderstanding. It would be correct, but incorrect. Yes, everything's God. But your house is no more God than my house, or the guy next to you, or even the ghetto, right? It's all God. So as the soul evolves and matures, its orientation toward persons, places, and things begins to be one where it is more in empathy for everything that it sees that's challenging, that people are experiencing. And it's one of resonance. Instead of seeing a tree as wood and something you can cut down, burn, or build a house out of, you see a living being there, and you might find Steiner, who said it's okay to kill something like a tree as long as you're going to do something better with it. So if you're going to cut trees down to build a pay parking lot, we don't need more of those.
Yeah, we got enough condos and parking lots.
But if you're going to build a school to really educate children, the trees themselves will sacrifice for that.
100%.
So what happens is as you evolve spiritually, then the paradox of it is you still are identified in a material body, but at the level of the psyche, you're dematerializing. So then you eventually get to the point through spiritual practice. Like I'm a remote viewer, so I'm very used to traveling around with no body. I do have a body, but it's a body of light. It's
the rainbow body, right?
You could call it a rainbow body. It's a body of light. But if I'm interacting with someone in the astral dimension or even in the mental dimension, but particularly the astral dimension, like if I was to meet you in the astral dimension, your body would seem as real to me there as this one does here. Because in that dimension, you have a body that is physical relative to the vibrational frequency of that dimension. Here, our bodies are physical because they reflect the vibration and the density of this dimension, right? Like if you breathe air out of your lungs underwater, those bubbles are a lot less physical than the water, so they rise up.
Yes.
Right? So we say, okay, there's a bubble made of gas, and it's going to rise up till it bursts into the atmosphere, but our bodies are going to rise up a lot slower because they're more dense. As that analogy is, as we mature spiritually, this consciousness of us begins to be like that bubble. It starts to expand and rise up, and our sphere of awareness, our sphere of connection, our sphere of perception starts to include more and more until the next thing you know, the sun's not out there, it's in here. The galaxy's not out there, it's in here. Yes, you can see it out there, but you also experience it in here. So then you get to the point where you don't actually need to incarnate into a physical body because you have a light body. So you may incarnate into the astral dimension. And you'll have a life that seems as real as this one, but you'll be in a higher vibrational dimension where the power of thought and emotion and creativity is much more responsive to your mind, but you aren't going to be allowed to evolve into one of those dimensions until you've demonstrated enough moral fiber to be respectful to the beings that have already worked their way out of the material dimensions. Because, see, this is why I mentioned to you, sometimes when I show up in other dimensions, people get a little triggered because they recognize that I'm from this dimension.
Yes.
And so, to give you an analogy, it would be like if you went to a rated X sex movie or something that was purely adult, and all of a sudden somebody comes and sits beside you with a 3-year-old. And you're like, what in the world is she doing in here with that kid?
Yes.
And the kid starts crying and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, this is an adult movie, and I don't want to be here with kids, and kids should not be seeing this, so you can't really enjoy yourself.
100%. You're separate.
Right? So the beings that have evolved out of this dimension, who have often been here, anywhere from 50 to hundreds of lifetimes, they're like more mature souls, and they don't want a bunch of snotty kids running around that need their butts wiped and their noses wiped and who keeps doing silly shit and starting trouble because it is disruptive to them, and they've earned their evolution. There's a guy named Fred Bell who wrote a very comprehensive, he used to be, I think he was a scientist that worked for NASA, a very evolved guy, expert in crystals and many things, but he describes what's called the ring pass knot. He says around the earth plane, there's an energetic ring. It's actually a series of rings. I've seen pictures that he's created of it, and I've heard others speak of it as well. I've never encountered it myself, maybe because I've got permission to pass it, because I've been way past that ring. But he says the ring pass knot is an energetic barrier, and that souls cannot pass it if they're not evolved enough to live in harmony with the souls that have evolved outside this dimension. And so we're sort of in a like a playpen around kids, like you bring kids to a park and you put them inside of a fenced area so
they can't get away
and they can't be stolen, right?
Yeah.
So the ring pass nod is a concept that I really feel has merit. I've never seen it. I've seen his writings about it, and I have seen others describe it using similar words, but I share it because it's a good concept to explain that we're all sort of here in kindergarten, spiritually, or maybe elementary school. I think it starts at kindergarten and goes to elementary school. And you can have very evolved souls in one area that are very unevolved in another. So you can see Bill Gates is very evolved in his use of technology, in his ability to control people, in his ability to make money. But he's spiritually
a toddler.
Not even got training wheels yet. He's completely and utterly unaware of the impact that he has on the rest of us, and he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And Plotinus and others talk about that too. There's a master named Dwal Kuhl who wrote a book called The Rainbow Bridge, and he's got a couple of books. And I think it's Annie Besant that suggested from her experience that he was the reincarnation of Confucius. And I'm not sure on that. I'm just quoting from memory. He talks about similar things, and he describes how we evolve through the different bodies. There was something from his teachings I was going to tell you, but it slipped out of my mind. But the point is that the question is, what are we all doing here? We're doing one thing. We're learning what love is.
Absolutely.
We're learning what love is. We're learning how to use it. Love, and from my system of exploration and investigation for years, evolves in 4 stages. First is sex and violence love. Sex and violence love means you come into the world, you don't understand gravity, you don't understand fire, you don't understand that you can get cut by glass and knives, you don't understand who's safe and who's not safe, who you can trust, who you can't trust. You know very well, a lot of the most dangerous people to kids are their parents.
100%.
So kids get sexually abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused, and physically abused because unevolved souls tend to attract to unevolved parents. So it sounds bad, but the reality of it is that sex and violence love means strong polarity. It's like if you watch a newbie try to ride a bicycle, they're all over the sidewalk.
100%. They have no balance.
Or
they have no
someone
coordination.
that's drunk can't keep themselves in their own lane.
Yeah.
So sex and violence love just means a lot of shift from positive to negative polarity.
Ping pong ball.
Emotional highs and lows.
Yeah.
Poor consistency, things like that. Or violence to I love you to I hate you. So that's the beginning stage of learning to work with love. But you see, the lower the stage of love you're in, the more you attract the pain teacher to wake you up. And since God can't die, God doesn't really have any issue with dying or getting beat up because it's all an experience. And God's as willing to experience the negative of itself as it is the positive, because how can God know God if it doesn't experience the range of itself?
Absolutely.
So that's the paradox. Hitler is as loved by God as the Buddha. And so is Bill Gates and all these people in the world today stirring up the shit. And in the Law of One, Ra talks about how souls take on the negative polarity, and it's their spiritual function to do negative things because it forces us to grow spiritually. It forces us to be more creative, to work together, without which the inertia of matter makes us very sluggish and very slow. And that's the problem with materialism, is that people don't really have a concept of something beyond their material gains. So their sense of growth is, look how much money I've got. Look how many houses I've got. It's all about material gain. But they don't realize that that's also coming at the cost of an excessive destruction of other life forms.
Absolutely.
So there's sex and violence love. Sex and violence love matures to conditional love. And the simple way to describe that is, I love you if, I love you when you do this.
Yes.
I love you and you've got to do that. And I love you, but you better do that.
And how normal has that become, right? Like, I mean, it's normalcy in society.
It's an important stage because it's you see, if you rent a car like you did to get here, you got to sign a rental contract.
100%.
And it says you're not going to destroy my car, and you're not going to put diesel in a gasoline car or gasoline in a diesel car. You'll return it at this time. You'll fill the tank with gas, because if they don't do that, then they'll never get their cars back. People will just take off with them and destroy them.
Yeah.
And we have to sign contracts to use a phone, which most of are crooked. But conditional love is a big advancement, because that's when you're saying, I feel loved by you when this happens. And there, the other person has an opportunity to say, I can't agree to that because I don't feel like I'm being loved or loving in that way. So you have a choice to rent the car or not, rent the house or not, go out and have a date or not, get married or not, start a business with this person or not. Sex and violence love is where you just capture people and make them do shit, like parents forcing you to wash the dishes or clean your room, which unfortunately is going on in the world right now. You will do the dishes, and you will take this shot, and you will take this whatever. But sex and violence love generates a lot of polarity. Whenever there's a lot of polarity, there's a lot of potential for change, because it brings chaos. And whenever a system goes into a state of chaos and it becomes unstable, it's a perfect time to change. You know what push hands is?
No.
Okay, well, it's a Tai Chi exercise where you try to push the other guy over.
Yeah, yep.
Well, you get someone like Master Fong Ha, unless you're Jean-Claude Van Damme, you're not even going to move the guy. I mean, trust me, it's like trying to move a tree. But if you can get him moving, if someone comes from behind him and tricks him and pulls him, all you got to do is touch him and he'll fall over.
Wow.
So whenever a system like the world is right now goes into a state of chaos, it's the perfect time for us all to say, what do we want to create now?
Well, because the pain point's high enough, right? And you don't change.
Motivation's there.
Yeah, you don't change in times of comfort. You change from the discomfort of the pain teacher.
And it's unstable.
Yeah.
So you can do something with it, right?
Yes.
Like think of clay. If clay is really dry and hard, you can't sculpt very well with it. But if you grind it up and add water to it, it's flexible. So you had to take it through the chaos stage of turning it into a powder. Then you had to add water to it. And now it's still in a state of chaos. But once you shape the sculpture and let it dry, then you have a rigid structure. So it's back to stability again.
It's like alchemy.
It is alchemy.
Yeah.
Everything's alchemy.
Yeah.
There's nothing that doesn't involve alchemy. That's why alchemy is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I've studied it for many years, and I practice it. So the point I'm making is that conditional love, you have transcended sex and violence love. But in order to be a healthy person, anytime you transcend a stage of consciousness, you have to include it. Because you see, as loving as a guy as you are, if somebody tries to mug you, you might want to protect yourself.
100%.
So you have to go down to sex and violence love to meet sex and violence love, or you might get a knife through your chest
100%.
or lose your life.
Yeah.
So this is why it takes spiritual evolution, because you need to know how much force or how much energy do I need to meet that with to neutralize the situation versus just annihilate the person and become another sex and violence threat. You just go from injury to illness sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And, Kung Fu was developed by the monks because robbers and bandits kept stealing all their food and beating the monks up. So they got together and said, how do we develop a defensive art with the intention of only disabling people enough to protect us, but not to hurt them any more than that? So you see they're using spiritually high consciousness to develop an art that allows them to enter sex and violence love only out of empathy and compassion for the fact that these unevolved people keep being destructive to them.
It's equal.
So they're just trying to neutralize and stabilize as opposed to annihilate. Now, when you get guys in a fight or in a MMA, you see there's just a lot of ego and attitude, and it's to annihilate.
100%.
And so you always attract yourself to meet your reality. So then the soul grows to empathetic and compassionate love. The sign that you're entering into or are in the stage of empathy and compassionate love. Empathy means, of course, to feel. And I'm using the Buddhist conception of compassion, which is to understand. If you look empathy and compassion up in a dictionary, they mean almost the same thing, which doesn't make sense to me at all. But in the Buddhist conception, compassion is often presented as understanding where empathy is feeling one's pain or feeling one's experience. So when you enter into empathy and empathetic and compassionate love, you begin to see the criminals of the world, and you can look deep enough into yourself to find that criminal in you. You can find Donald Trump in there. You can find Bill Gates. You can find the axe murderer and even the pedophile. But you have to be quite evolved to find a pedophile inside of yourself, because it's such a repulsive, anti-social, anti-cultural concept that most people will just deny it's there.
Yeah, because it would fragment them if they saw it there.
I say if it's out there, it's in there. And if you aren't brave enough to find it, then you're just still playing a game called conditional love, and the condition is only this exists in me, not that, which means God doesn't exist.
Yeah, in reality, it's if you spot it, you got it, right?
Yeah, if you spot it, you got it. That doesn't mean that you're not managing it. It doesn't mean you have to act it out. But empathy and compassion literally is a form of love where you actually can recognize everything around you as an expression of some aspect of yourself, usually that you've already healed. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it. It would still be in your unconscious.
Exactly. Be too challenging to notice consciously.
Yes. So from empathetic and compassionate love, what happens is your sphere of heart intelligence grows until you encompass the whole world. And then you feel the oceans in you, you feel the sky in you, you feel the trauma to the planet. And that's one of the challenges with growing spiritually, is because if you can't take the pain that Mother Earth takes, you're not going to let yourself grow into that. You see, a lot of people think spiritual growth means less and less pain, but that's sort of a childish ice cream parlor concept. Everything's sweet and I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to live forever and it's all going to be perfect. Well, that's a complete and utter misunderstanding of the fact that God can't know itself until it tries everything, and it's willing to try everything because God is unadulterated, unconditional love. So the paradox of it all is God is unconditional love. But as unconditional love, God has nobody to love. Therefore, that creates desperate aloneness for God. So the desire to experience itself and to experience companionship and love is what draws creation into existence. That's the first move from unconditional love or non-duality into duality. In Tantra, then that God of unconditional love we would call Shakti. But Shakti has nobody to love, so she creates Shiva out of herself. In Taoism, the emptiness of God is yin, and that which is projected in form is yang. So Shiva or Shakti is yin, who gives birth to yang, Shiva, and Shiva is the father god because it's that original relationship that produces all created things. The point is that until you're, as a man, can allow yourself to feel the pain of a woman giving birth in empathy, you're never going to really understand a woman and what she goes through. Until you can allow yourself to feel the pain of all the creatures in nature that are dying unnecessarily because of our ignorance, you're not going to evolve spiritually to that level. So when you listen to someone like Thich Nhat Hanh talk, you're listening to a man who lived through Vietnam and has seen people tortured and lit on fire and bombed with napalm right in front of his own people. And, the Dalai Lama, 1 million of his people got destroyed by the Chinese. And so you see, when you actually see someone that's genuinely evolved at that level, you get to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And
the reality of it, which is far from what, again, most people think it is, which is all sunshine and rainbows. That's not what enlightenment is. If you want to call it enlightenment.
So once you get to empathy and compassion, you can grow the spheres of empathy and compassion until you become unconditionally loving, and you pretty much know what's happening because you start having spontaneous non-dual union experiences, which are called mystical experiences. And all of a sudden you become one with all that is, or one with the earth, or any number of things. Ultimately, you reach nirvana, And the word nirvana technically means to extinguish or to blow out. Most people think nirvana means to be as high as hell. But that's sort of the, rock version of nirvana. That's not the spiritual version. The soul doesn't want to rush to nirvana, because the problem is once you evolve yourself to that point, you can end up waking up in the body of a cockroach or being an asteroid, because God's got nothing else to do. So, God says, let's do it all again. And it could be a gazillion lifetimes before you're back in a human body. So there's an inherent resistance to nirvana in the soul, because the paradox is the soul, being unconditional love in its authentic nature, can never be fully satisfied by anything but what it is, which is God. So the journey of spiritual evolution, paradoxically, is the journey out of matter, which is things, to unity with that which is no thing.
Yes.
And so, I don't know if you've ever seen me do this in any of the classes you've been in with me, but what I do to help people understand what spiritual evolution is I say, write the word evolution down and leave some space between the letters. And then you start from the end of the word, the N, and you go N-O-IT-U-love. And so the word carries the truth in itself. If you read it backward, it says evolution spiritually means you grow until there is no it you love. That's what unconditional love is.
That's beautiful.
Yes. So just like evil is live backwards, so being evil is to live backwards, to not care for life. Morals are life affirmative codes of conduct. They're about protecting life. Evil is against life. So evil is an act against life. To evolve means to grow spiritually to the point that there's no it you love. There's no my people versus your people, my color against your color, my sex against your sex. When you get to the point where you become one with it all as a state of blissful realization of the eternal now, which doesn't come easy. Joseph Campbell says if you look at the etymology of the word bliss, it's rooted in pain. You can't know what bliss is without the experience of pain, just like you cannot know what good is without evil. So paradoxically, to have good, we have to have evil, or good means nothing.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell says, right? Bliss is any emotion felt all the way through, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest dualities I see is, this whole idea of what are good and desirable emotions, right? What are good and desirable experiences, all of this type of thing, and what are undesirable emotions. And then where people get stuck in their ability to have their emotions flow through them, right? Hello, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying the show. I wanted to stop by and fill you in on our brand new, completely free to join Facebook community called the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle. Now, I imagine many of you are aware of the newest creation within Highly Optimized, which is the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. Alex and I have been having so much fun empowering coaches with the skill set of coaching with cannabis and helping them up-level their coaching practice that we wanted to create a place where anyone could join to ask questions, receive free information on how to work with cannabis in the way we teach in the program, and be able to gain clarity around how to get the best results with their clients in order to become financially independent in their coaching practice. To join, hop over to the link in our Instagram bio and send us a request. It is our intention to assist as many coaches, facilitators, and healers as possible in the important work they are doing in the world. And if you are looking to join a community of like-minded individuals just like you, who are passionate about helping their clients achieve the highest quality of life possible, the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle is for you. I am looking forward to speaking with all of you in the group, and as always, enjoy the show. It's so powerful. And one of the things I've really been curious on, and I've heard you speak to a couple times in different episodes, but, I'd really like to get a really nice idea of what's necessary for humanity right now, considering that, like I said in the intro, life can be looked at as a psychedelic experience in and of itself with no psychedelics, right?
Well, it is.
Yeah, and if we look around right now, we're in the come up, right, essentially, right, where we're like, maybe we took more than we thought we took, right? That's what society
Or not enough.
Yeah, or not enough. Yeah. And, I'm curious for you, like, what do you feel humanity must embody at this point or must learn in order for us to continue evolving, right? And in order for Gaia not to die, right? All of these types of things.
Well, I think that it's a very complex question that could be answered from 1,000 angles.
Yeah.
I think the most important realization that has to happen first is that we need each other and that diversity equals survivability. And one of the analogies I give to people is I say, do you like food? Yes. What are your favorite kinds of food? Well, inevitably you hear someone say Chinese food or Mexican food.
Indian food.
Or Indian food or Brazilian food or Greek food or whatever. Okay, so isn't it amazing that your sense of what is exciting requires that somebody from another country shared something that's outside of your own cultural norm? What music do you love? Well, look, George Harrison traveled to India and worked with Ravi Shankar to learn the sitar and studied with a yogi master to incorporate, to not only heal himself, but to bring in a way of expressing music that wasn't common in the Western world. And, you know, who doesn't love the Beatles, right?
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying is we've been programmed for profitable reasons into hating others, into rejecting them. And this goes back to religious war and territorial war. And, you know, one of the reasons we're inherently driven to know somebody's last name is because in the past, your last name not only would tell where you were from, but it would say what you do. If your name is Smith, you probably are a metal worker.
Yeah, you're a blacksmith.
Right. You know, so if you go to places like England, the names are usually much more recognized. Or in Ireland, you're from this clan, or even a Native American Indian. You know, your name really is like an address.
Absolutely.
You know, but those addresses are actually saying you're either friendly or you're not.
Yes.
You're safe or you're not.
Yes.
So you could be the nicest person in the world, but if you have the wrong name, you might get treated really bad or killed. We're in this time where sexism, racial tension, religious differences are all being used to keep us confused and get our eyes off the ball while they do their little dirty tricks with Mother Earth and with the rest of us. But the point that I'm driving at is our first step towards healing is realizing that we need each other. We need each other's genius. We need each other's creativity, just like we love each other's food and each other's music and each other's art. I mean, what would art be if you only looked at Western art?
Not that direct of an experience, that's
no,
for sure.
You know, imagine somebody who had never seen Picasso or somebody who had never seen any number of the great artists. So when you realize that diversity is survivability in nature, because the more diversity you have, the more options you have for different circumstances. But what we've got now is this narrowing down through censorship and isolation, which is the opposite of diversity, and it has raised anxiety, depression, and suicide through the roof because it goes against what it means to be a human. So the key point is the first step towards resolving is to realize that we're all under attack. And it's going to take a while for the people that are playing the game out of their unconscious drunkenness or passivity or immaturity or laziness to not look into things or needing a big daddy to tell them what to do to wake up. But it's happening, as you know. I mean, you kill 50,000 people and wound about 1 million of them, and they start, the hive starts to wake up.
100%.
So eventually we're going to come to a point where we all really realize that the world population is in a dangerous situation where just a handful of people with a lot of money, a lot of power are trying to harvest us, control us, and use us and put us in an electronic jail and farm us like they do pigs, chickens, and cows. And when the spirit of the human being wakes up, it resists control. We're naturally free spirits.
Absolutely.
Then the next thing we got to do is once we realize we need each other, we got to realize we have got to protect the planet because nobody can be here without food, water, air, and we got to keep the temperature stable, right? We need earth, we need water, we need a stable temperature on the planet, and we have to have an infrastructure to support life. And the same people that are behind the games going on own the corporations that are poisoning and polluting and destroying the planet. And part of the wake up is we have to realize our education systems are not education systems. They're indoctrination systems.
Absolutely.
To get us to play this very dangerous game, but not realize what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So the simple approach that I see has to happen is first we've got to realize we're all in trouble together, because the powers that are trying to control us, all you got to do is look at what's happening in Australia and Canada, and that's our future.
Yeah.
And
it's terrifying.
I have a lot of students and even instructors in Australia, and they are scared to death about what's going on over there.
I bet.
And, I've had several of my friends from these different countries flee by sailboat or jet plane or whatever they can, and some of them are glad they did.
Oh, yeah.
One of my friends from Australia got out of Dodge, and I think he either flew or sailed. I think he might have sailed because they wouldn't let him fly out of Australia without being vaccinated. But he went to Fiji, and he got a hold of me and said, Paul, if you need a safe place to go, these people are living close to Earth. They're not thinking about this stuff at all. But then 2 weeks later, he goes, oh my God, Paul, you're not going to believe it. I got to get out of here now. All these medical people showed up, and now they're forcing all these people into vaccinations here, and I've got to hide over here too. So they're putting the full court press on, right? But you see, once we realize that we're all facing the same demon, mm-hmm. and that we're all being given an initiation opportunity to become adults and start taking responsibility for ourselves, because people that think for themselves already know they're not going to play this game, mm-hmm. right? But people that are still children psychologically just go, yes, Uncle Bill. Yes,
yes,
Mr.
Daddy
Fauci.
Government.
Yes, Mr. Biden. Whatever you want. I'll be a good girl. I want to get my paycheck, and I want to be able to ride the bus and go to the pizza parlor. And I'm like, yeah. What happens if you don't ever see any of those again?
Yeah.
And what if that's the plan?
Absolutely.
So step one is we have to realize we need each other, because we all have to work together. Like if you think of what a school of fish does in the ocean, little fish get together to create the illusion that they're a big fish to scare the big fish mm-hmm. away. Well, we've got to get together and become harmonious in our intention to protect life and freedom, because as one fish, we're way bigger than the billionaires with all their tricks and games. And we've got to use the wise people among us to educate the less awake ones about what you believe and don't believe on a phone or a screen, mm-hmm. and the kinds of things that, teach people how to think, not what to think, which is what I've devoted my life to teaching people. And then we got to realize something quite profound. I've said it many times on podcasts, and I'll say it here. If you could wave a magic wand and get rid of this whole COVID shenanigan like it was never here, and we went back to business as usual, if you look at the state of the oceans, the state of the soil, the state of the atmosphere, and the temperature of the earth, and what we're doing with fossil fuels and big industry, and how bad we've damaged the planet, the fact that in the last 50 years we've killed 60% of the animal species on this planet, and 75% of the insects are gone. That's
and the soil too, right? I mean,
the soil is wiped out.
Yeah.
Look, I got books right here mm-hmm. in this library showing that in the year 1961, the Agricultural Department of the U.S. government, I believe it was, had determined that 63% of all arable land had been permanently damaged by chemical farming.
It's terrifying.
Okay, so you have to say, we're running out of places to farm because we're turning the world into a desert. Mm-hmm. Okay? And I got news for you. Not much grows in sand.
Yeah.
Try planting your tomatoes on the beach and see what happens. So we really have to say, okay, so the question is, if you take that magic wand and you make it go back to business as usual, even if we made ourselves forget about this last 2 years, I ask this question. And anybody intelligent usually gets the answer pretty close. I say, Ryan, how long do we have before we have a catastrophe that makes COVID and all this shit look like a pimple on an elephant's ass?
Not long.
Not long, right? Rachel Carlson wrote the book Silent Spring, the year I was born, 1961. And that was a shocking book to read.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's a million times worse now.
100%.
It's a miracle. Every fucking day you're alive, you should just get on your hands and knees like a Muslim and kiss the earth. Look at the sun and say, thank you, Father, Son. Thank you, Mother Earth, because I get another day in the sandbox of planet Earth to play and love and grow.
Yes, and Shambhala.
Because it is a miracle that we are here. A miracle of miracles.
Absolutely.
And so what I tell people, you would be lucky if we've got 10 years before there's no more fruit and vegetables. Because once you get rid of the insects, you got no more sex organs. Once you start poisoning the water, you poison everything in nature. We have got massive amounts of cancer in sea life and wildlife, stuff that even 50 years ago was rare to find animals out in nature with cancer. It's all over the place. We've got fish that are losing their sexual differentiation. We've got just an endless supply. You look at Arthur Firstenberg's book, The Invisible Rainbow, and it shows you what electromagnetic pollution and electronic devices have done to the world and what we're doing to ourselves with them, going all the way back into the 1700s. It's a shocking expose of hard science. And it's like, why is this not on mainstream television? And why is not every governing body making immediate changes? And why are we not using the advanced technology that we have and the geniuses that build it to build safe technologies? Why? I'll tell you why. Because most of the people that run these corporations, if you look into it, they're atheists.
Absolutely.
So they see the world as an object.
A commodity, right?
A commodity that it's like, it's you got two things going on. You've got an atheistic view of the world, three things, coupled with a Darwinistic view of the world, which is whoever is the strongest wins. I'll kick your ass and take it.
Yeah.
Survival of the fittest. And then you've got the Christian view that we're all fallen and that we're here in the garden being punished because Mother Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
We're all sinners.
So we will toil in the garden and in the rocks and in the thorns for umpteen generations. And so we think what we've got to do is repent to get to heaven, which there is no heaven. Heaven and hell have the same address, halfway between your left ear and your right ear.
Yes, 100%.
So what we've got, and I've watched interviews with people that really believe this. We've got a lot of Christians and Muslims and people of the Jewish faith that have this Armageddon programming that think that Jesus or some savior is coming back and that we have to bring ourselves into this annihilation state in order to get to the freedom of heaven. Okay, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is on earth and men do not see it.
Yes.
Which means you're already there.
100%. There's nothing you need to do to get there, right?
No,
it's actually less being.
Yeah. You need to wake up.
Yeah, exactly. We are human beings at the end of the day, not human doings, right? And so we're doing so much to find this heaven when really all it takes is a subtraction of the metaphorical traffic jam that has become our reality, aka hell, right? Synonymous with hell. Subtracting from that will allow what's always been there to come through.
So the answer to your question is, what are we all doing here? We're learning to work with polarity because consciousness cannot exist without polarity. You can't have north without south, hot without cold, inside without outside, woman without man, ... to the size of a dictionary, right?
Yeah.
You can't make meaning without polarity. How could anything mean anything if there was nothing to compare it to?
Yes.
Right? So we're actually God at a certain level of development. We're like immature gods going through our training we're now being initiated out of childhood into young adulthood. And the reality of it is a rite of passage in a native culture, in a native tribe, is a very dangerous and real thing. And Joseph Campbell, Marcia Eliade, Carl Jung, and many of the other greats that have researched all this will tell you right up front. And if you study Native American culture, I've got an entire section of my library from studying it around the world, from the Aboriginals to the Iroquois to the Sioux to whoever, Hopi. Many of them, if a young man did not pass his trial into manhood, they would kill him and eat him.
Yeah.
Because they could not carry adult bodies that didn't contribute to the tribe because they had to hunt, fish, and take care of those people. So if you're not bringing in as much or more than it costs energetically and resources to have you there, then you aren't a contributing member. But we are carrying in the tribe of humanity billions of non-contributing members because they're in adulthood and they have, as Jamie Wheel said on my podcast, they have a sort of a sense of righteousness, like they're owed something. So the purpose of an initiation trial is to dismember the person so significantly that they don't recognize the child anymore. You look and you've got teeth missing and you've got scars. If you see what the Maori do, they have to go through days and days of hand tattooing with sharp rocks and dye being driven into their skin, one hammer hit at a time, and it's exquisitely painful. So when you come out of that ceremony, your whole face and your whole body could be covered in tattoos, and you've been through as much pain as a long childbirth, and you can never see yourself as a child again. You can get your bones broken, your teeth knocked out, your skull cracked. The art of an initiation, which is why it's always run by the elders, is to bring someone as close to death as possible without damaging them.
Yes.
So that they can still be a warrior, a hunter, and support the tribe. They've lost their fear of death because they faced death. So the paradox of it is Fauci, Gates, and all of these little evil geniuses are actually initiating us into adulthood.
Yes.
And those who follow the fake daddy rules are excluding themselves from the graduation, and 50,000 of them or 40-something thousand of them are dead, and about 1 million are badly injured. But these aren't the kind of injuries like broken bones and scars that heal up. This is, damage to the nervous system, damage to the organs. You're
damage
talking
to the
about
DNA. I mean,
you're talking about being in purgatory for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
For not thinking for yourself. And that's just, and God says yes to it all. God says yes to everything. Most people's perception of God is so dangerously immature and childish. It's just shocking. If there's one thing I can tell you, an encounter with God will destroy everything you ever thought was real.
Yes.
It will blow the religious dogmas to pieces, and you will realize that you don't have a framework in your mind to deal with the truth of what God is.
That's what 5-MeO gave me as an experience. No way to describe it.
God is like a 2 billion volt blast of lightning to an iPhone. There will be nothing left of the phone but smoke.
Yes.
Jung says all religious systems are designed to protect you from the direct experience of God. Or he also says all religious systems are designed to protect you from the religious experience, which both are true. But the paradox of it is all religious systems have all these polarities in them: heaven and hell, good and evil, Satan and Jesus. That's why Jung said when Christianity created Jesus, he cast a light so bright they had to create Satan to counterbalance him.
Yes,
because
to balance
the truth
it out.
of God is unconditional love equals 0. So if you have a positive, you have to have a negative because the truth is always 0.
Absolutely.
So good creates evil.
Yes.
Isaiah 45:7, King James Bible. I create the light and the dark. I create good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And you know what? The Christians don't like that passage, and in newer versions of the Bible, they rewrote it so it doesn't say that.
Of course. And how many other times have they taken things out like that in the Bible, and then people read it literally when it's really meant to be read as a metaphor, like most texts are, because when they were written originally, humans were in a much more right-brain dominant state, right? And so it's so interesting how people take things so literally these days. It makes sense with the left brain being so worshipped in our society today, but it's very challenging, right? Like, I mean, these are the things that I think we're speaking to, that when I interact with plant medicines and even in my normal reality, but especially when I'm on plant medicines, a lot of it is painful because I feel all of this.
Well, not only that, yes, the plant medicines take you through the very initiation process that life does at an accelerated pace. And they say, get rid of your bullshit story. look at what you're lying to yourself about. You're looking at how much pain you're holding on. You're still upset at something your daddy did to you when you were 13 and you're 40. He was a human. He did the best he could. He was tortured too. So the point is, plant medicines can not only initiate you into healing and to growing and to realizing who you really are and what you really are, but if you get a big enough dose, you can have the true experience of dying.
Oh, yeah.
And when you die, you have the opportunity to experience God, which is the rest of you. It's not, there's no God out there.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not in here. It's just the part of you that you did not have a faculty to comprehend until that moment. But the reality of it is the only way you can know God is to become God. But to become God, you have to completely extinguish the ego. So the paradox is, and I've been there, once you're inside of God, there's no you anymore. And on the way in, it's as though you're being burned in a fire alive, or you're dissolving, and it's intensely scary.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It's terrifying as
I've gone through it a couple times.
I have come. I'm an ex-paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. I mean, I've earned my silverback wings in many ways. I can tell you, I've come out of journeys crying for my mother, scared shitless, literally scared to death, because I got into God, went unconscious, but had no idea that I was ever going to come home or that I was even alive. And all of a sudden,
there you are again.
I wake up and I'm like, oh my frickin' God, that was just wicked. I do not think many people are ready for that.
Yeah. One of the first times it happened to me was actually, I was interacting with mushrooms and sitting in ceremony, and I did some breath work. And I had been experimenting with different types of breath work when I was interacting with psychedelics. And this was a large dose of mushrooms, about 6 grams in a tea. And I was with Rachel at the time. She was already fully sent, right? And so I look at her, I'm like, do you want to do breath work? She's like, no, right? And so I said,
every cell is already breathing.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, I don't need to go any farther. So I sit down, all smitten, and I do a round, and I legitimately whited out, completely whited out. Had no idea what happened. Came back in and was sitting in the exact same position, I imagine 5 or 10 seconds, if that. But I came back in and was thoroughly shook. Like, had never experienced something like that. I mean, I'd done 5-MeO and kind of set myself up for more of understanding that, but I didn't think that was going to happen, that experience, right? I had done that breath work on LSD, on MDMA, and it was nice, and it's sometimes scary, right? You went pretty far out. But mushrooms, it was like it took me to the center of me, which is the center of the universe, right? Like, so, I mean, that was an incredibly jarring experience, but also a very educational experience, right? So I'm like, wow, that's very interesting. And I came to the same conclusion you did. I'm like, I don't think many people are ready for that experience, and I don't think that everyone is meant to have that experience in this reality.
Well, if you have that experience before you're ready for it, what you end up with is a schizophrenic.
100%.
That's what you end up. You end up with a very broken person, and that's what I've spent many years working with people to put back together. And it can take, I've had cases that took 3 years in therapy to return to normal. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I've noticed too. And one of the main reasons that I talk so highly about people getting educated from people like you, right? Like, do your research first, right? Yeah. This is not meant for everyone. And so it's so important to have your faculties. And Paul, this has been amazing, man. I've had such a good time riffing with you. And I really want to make sure that I allow people, if they don't already know, where they can find the Chek Institute, where they can find any upcoming classes and courses you're teaching, any workshops you're teaching. Where can I send people to find more about that?
Well, I have a lot of websites, but I think the Chek Institute is probably an easy place to start. It's chekinstitute.com. If you sign up to get our newsletters and things, then you can get notified of courses and workshops. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Paul Chek live, and I've got like 730 something videos on there on everything.
Literally everything.
Yeah. And then my podcast is Living Number 4, capital D, with Paul Chek, and it's on every major podcast outlet. And you can go to the homepage of the Chek Institute, and there's a podcast tab, and then there's all the show notes and stuff are there. My YouTube channel, where you can see the videos of the podcasts that we film, is youtube.com/living4D with Paul Chek. I think. If I go there, I just click the link that I have on my computer, so I don't normally think you'll find it. Just search Living 4D with Paul Chek on YouTube. those are the main things. We do have a social media site, not a media site, where we have a lot of great stuff like extended podcasts and things like that.
Chekiva, right?
Chekiva, CHEKIVA.com. Those are the main things. I can't think right now of anything better. I have so many other things like my blog, but you can find almost anything through the ones I've just shared.
Perfect.
And then we do run workshops here at the Rainbow.
They are the best.
Yeah, they're out of the Chek system. Those are just me and Angie's private training. And I don't even know what the address to give people for that is. But if somebody wants to know, to be put on a notification list for the workshops that we run privately outside of the Institute, just email Penny at Paul Chek, C-H-E-K, that's C-H-E-K, not C-H-E-C-K, Penny at paulchek.com, and ask to be put on the list to be notified of all upcoming workshops, which we have a series we're putting out, and I think we're already 2 into it. And I believe my next one is a 2-day mandala workshop, which is
amazing,
very powerful.
Yes.
We've sold the last one out very quickly.
It was incredible. Yeah. One of the best experiences I've ever had at a workshop.
Well, this one's going to be just as powerful. I can tell you. I
have to fly back out for that.
Yeah, you'll dig it. Always get amazing people.
Yes.
These things, So there's a lot of deep, powerful healing that goes on, and you don't have to worry if you're not an artist. I give you a complete art kit. You get your own paints. You take it home with you. I spend a fair bit of money to supply people with the tools to continue their spiritual practice through art. And usually it only takes 1 mandala workshop to get the art spirit working through you.
That's all it took for me.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
That's about it. My podcast and the Institute, I can't handle anymore,
Yeah.
It's full on.
Yes. And Paul, I have one last question for you,
Yeah.
man. And that question is this. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Paul Chek would suggest to allow them the smoothest experience possible?
Start small. Start small. Start with maybe 1/3 of a gram of mushrooms, which is 1 gel cap typically, and do it on a day that you don't have any responsibilities, like a weekend. And 1/3 of a gram, you'll be able to walk around, you could do anything. But it just gives you an introduction, and you will notice you start feeling more of your emotions. You might have more trapped thoughts, feelings, emotions, and judgments coming up, but it's not going to be so strong that the medicine is overpowering your sense of self-control. So I think with any of them, the big fear is that whenever the ego thinks it's going to lose control, it gets scared, and then the medicines amplify your fear.
Mm-hmm.
So if you develop a relationship with the medicine and you work up 1 step at a time, over time, then when it comes time for a proper shamanic dose, you know what you're getting into. You already have your kind of your wings. You know what you're up for to some degree, and it's not going to be a big shock. Where the real problem happens is when people show up to their first ceremony and they're doing 5 grams of mushrooms or 3 hits of LSD or taking 2 cups of ayahuasca and finding themselves turning into anacondas and burning in hell and all sorts of neat shit.
Yeah, it goes from an experience to an ordeal like we talked about yesterday.
And the ordeal often involves you shitting yourself and pissing yourself and screaming for your mother for hours and running around in the jungle like a chicken with its head cut off and wondering, why the fuck did I do this?
Yeah. I'll take things you don't want to experience for 500, please.
Yes. But yeah, I think just start small. And you might have an experience of going, wow, I didn't feel anything. Well, good. At least you didn't get hurt.
You can always take more.
You didn't
but it's
get
hard
scared.
to subtract once you've already taken it.
There's tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
There's tonight.
Exactly.
And so then just go up from there. And my other piece of advice would be, it's usually better to be by yourself when you're doing these introductory doses, so you can really not have to deal with other people's energies or fears. Nothing's going to happen to you on 1/3 of a gram of mushrooms, or, you could take, not that I'm promoting, drugs, but if you took, say, a hit of LSD and put it in a cup of water and put 10 ounces of water, each ounce will have about 1/10 of a hit. So you can regulate that dose very easily and very, very carefully. It's just not hard to do at all.
Yeah, you can titrate it out.
And then you just sort of grow into it. But if you're with someone else and you take a hit of LSD a piece, or you do 3 grams or 4 grams of mushrooms a piece, then you may be in the most blissful state you've ever been in, but your friend's over there, putting up a hell of a stink. And you're like, oh my God, this is like a day in hell with this person. So I think my perspective is, as Terence McKenna says, go in the closet, close the door, turn the lights out, and have an experience.
Yes.
And if you by yourself, then whatever's going on is yours, and you can work with it. But at these lower doses, most of the experiences are very gentle, but enough of a shift that you definitely know something's going on. It's not like you're just drinking water or soda pop, So you're definitely going to have a shift, but it's safer and it's manageable. And I think, we wouldn't take some newbie into the gym and say, all right, let's put 500 pounds on the bar, see if you can lift it.
Yeah.
Because anybody with 2 brain cells knows that's a great way to destroy someone's spine.
Absolutely.
Or tear their rotator cuff. But yet people do this with psychedelics all the time.
Oh yeah, especially now.
Show up to their first experience and they've got 500 pounds on the bar and they end up injured, and, if you want to do that, go ahead. God loves it.
Yeah.
But it's up to you. It's your choice.
Great spirits down for whatever, right?
The answer is always yes from unconditional love.
Yeah.
So anyhow.
I love that. All right, guys. For any of you who know me personally or have listened to the show for some time now, you know full well my love and admiration for the Chekster. Paul is truly a testament to what can happen in our lives when we allow our souls to lead the way, ignore the naysayers, and stand up for what we know to be true in our hearts. For the last 30 years, Paul has been a passionate and loving voice in the realms of health, fitness, spirituality, and plant medicines, among many others, and has allowed an immeasurable amount of human beings to answer the call from within, give life the biggest send possible, and remember the pure magic that encompasses the nature of life when we choose to begin seeing ourselves as an integral piece of the whole that makes up the great mystery of existence. For anyone looking to revolutionize their entire state of being, including their physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual planes of health, along with becoming a part of a community of like-minded, like-hearted individuals whose collective mission it is to leave the Garden of Earth greener than when they found it, please take the initiative to begin your journey into Paul's teachings and the programs he has created at the Chek Institute. I can honestly say, as someone who has bought the ticket and taken the ride deep into the wisdom within these teachings and programs, that the potency of them to change your experience of life in a profound way is second to none. Paul, I sincerely extend my immeasurable gratitude and love for you for being such a force of love in the world, and thank you once again for being a dear friend, a mentor of mine, and source of inspiration for the world at large to ask themselves, what would love do now? And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Aho, great spirit.
Woo!